Hello and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jacob Finlay and I'm here with Chris O'Brien, and we are excited to be sharing this webinar today about 5 best practices to conquer inventory in your shop. Hey, Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Before we get started here, just real quick housekeeping. On the GoToWebinar software, GoToMeeting software, you're going to have a panel off to your right side, which you can make bigger by clicking a little red arrow and make smaller by clicking it again. If you want to go over there right now, just let us know where you're coming in from, what state or province. We'd love to see that, and that'll just kind of test out the question functionality. And that's also a box over there that you can use to ask us questions. And at the end, we'll take the questions and we'll get through as many of them as we can. So if you could do that. And let's see what we got coming in here. Washington, lots of Washington, Florida, Virginia. All right. Hey, Keith. Alberta, Montana. All right. Bolton, Canada. Hey, guys. Illinois. All right. Lots of answers coming in there. We're going to jump in and get started. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, what we're going to cover today is, real quick, introducing the presenters. My name is Jacob Finlay. I'm the CEO of Fullway. I'm a CPA by trade, and I'm joined by Chris O'Brien here. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm just that guy that has been around the industry for a while, private fleets, etc.
Just some guy.
Just some guy. Know a little bit about a lot of things, and assist with rolling out Fullway to large and small shops.
Love it. Great to have you here, Chris. All right. Now, what we're going to cover here, we did a webinar on inventory last August and had a great response on some of the things that we talked about. So we're going to recap some of that as kind of an entry into some new features that we've built since then, which we're going to go a bit in depth into.
Yeah.
So we're going to cover, things like carrying cost, locations, counting, how much inventory you ought to stock, just kind of as a primer. Then we're going to dive into these new features. All right, and we're actually going to start off with a polling question to kind of get a feel for this. So on the right side, you can you're going to be able to answer the polling question. So the question is, how much inventory do you carry? Is it 0? Is it over 250? Is it somewhere in between? I'm going to launch that question here. All right, we got responses coming in. So the goal, Chris, is to carry as much inventory as possible, right? That's
if you're in the middle of nowhere in Canada, near a large oil refinery that buys all of those parts.
Stock every part ever needed. Well, we'll see here. All right, let me close that poll.
Only if you sell them, stock them.
Okay, here's the results. We got majority is somewhere between 26 and 100,000, and then we've got a good portion that's got over a $250,000 in inventory. Nobody's carrying 0 inventory.
Yeah, we hear it a lot that people don't have inventory and they don't want to manage inventory, but it's highly unlikely that you're running a shop and don't have any form of inventory.
Okay, we're gonna show something here. So on the polling question, depending on the level or the amount of inventory that you're carrying, this here is an approximation on the high end of these ranges, but what the carrying cost of that inventory is yearly. So if you're at 25,000, it's costing you around $5,000. If you're at 100,000, 20 grand, and so forth. And those are real costs that you're paying for, and we're going to dive into that now.
Yeah, and I think, Jacob, if I'm not mistaken, that's about 20%, right?
Yeah,
from that last 20%. Webinar, it's about 20% carrying costs, and that has a lot of different components that make up that 20% that people don't realize, right?
Yep, exactly. Here they are. So carrying cost of inventory. Obviously, keeping parts around isn't free. It's not a matter of just buying the part and putting it on the shelf, and then the cost related to that part is done. Unfortunately, that's not how the real world works, as much as we would want that to be the case. The associated costs do add up pretty fast. So, the space to storage, the cost of capital, which is the cost of money. So if you're, maybe you're borrowing money, and paying 5%, 10%, whatever on that money, that's part of it. Damage, obsolescence, parts walking out the door, shrinkage, theft.
Yeah.
Right? And so the rule of thumb on inventory is it adds up to about 20% per year in carrying costs. So Chris, talk about this. I mean, you only want to stock what you need, right? And leverage special order parts when it's reasonable. So where do you kind of draw the line there?
It's definitely a tough call. And, I joking around that you have to be moving the part to stock it. Sometimes you're in a rural market and there's no choice. You definitely need to stock parts just because of the sheer amount of time to get the part to you. You're inevitable, you got to stock it. But there are some things you can do that, or some things that you should do to make sure that you're not losing it. If you think of inventory as cash on a shelf, right? Most of us have a safe that will, if I have cash at home, it goes in the safe, right?
Right.
Well, inventory being cash, it's wide open. Anybody can walk up, grab it at any time. So you want to mitigate that risk, right? You wouldn't just put stacks of cash all over the shelves and then just hope everybody would freely go in there. But you would, you have it obviously secure, you've got it organized, you're counting it. You would stock it if you're moving it and selling it and making money on it. If you're making money on money, you're going to do that investment all day.
Right.
And it's interesting that I recently was talking to a group that they have about $230,000 in inventory, and we went to their inventory reconciliation report, and I said, well, that seems like quite a lot. There was only 5 technicians, and I said, so that seems kind of like a lot for 5 technicians. And when we looked at their part sales, it was only running about $25,000 a month for the last 3 months. So even if I went back another month, it was still in the 20s. Why would you stock, that kind of volume?
Well, there can be different reasons for that, but
right.
From a numbers perspective, it does beg the question. What about if you're in a kind of a rural area, you're going to be paying fees for special order parts, right? Like a delivery fee, unless you meet a minimum threshold and so forth. That might be a motivator to keep inventory around so you don't have to pay those fees, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a slippery slope too, because it's amazing how much stuff just is shrunk or damaged, right? Just from parts coming in and out of the shelf. But
right.
Even if you get sucked into that, or you're in that market, and that's something that's required. I think another rule of thumb is if you only needed one part and it was going to cost you a couple of dollars more to get it shipped in versus buying a master case that you sat on for over a year or a year and a half, it was actually beneficial maybe to just pay the couple of dollars extra for the one part to come in, because at the end of the day, you're marking it up and passing that on to the customer anyway.
Yeah.
You might not be the cheapest in town, but I think at that point, everybody understands you're in the rural market. You're not in the cities. You're not getting the best pricing. There's added transportation costs. So I think sometimes we underestimate that paying $2 more for the part and then marking it up the same 30-40% you're marking up with, it's all a wash in the end.
Right.
You're still getting your margin that you want, and that's really the name of the game. So I think it's just, you got to be there's a lot of dynamics in here. You definitely, if you're going to lose business, if you're out of stock, there's some parameters around that. If you've got PMs locked up, we did a webinar on PMs, and I think it's important that if you have a PM schedule, you've got to stock the filters. You've got to stock the filters, the oil, the different things that are required for those wet services and dry services.
Right.
But as soon as you start getting past that, the last thing you're going to do is you replace 2 turbos this year, start stocking 3 or 4 turbos. You're probably going to wait for that thing to come in.
Right.
You're probably not going to wait for wheel seals. You're probably not going to wait for drums and shoes. You're probably going to stock some of those things that are fast movers. And I think if you're moving the part efficiently and quickly, and you're moving it monthly, or at the long end quarterly, then it's probably worth considering stocking. But if you're not moving it but once or twice a year, I'd probably start to question whether you should stock it or not.
So the delivery fee, it can be counterintuitive to want to pay that, but it could be the one that makes the most economic sense.
Correct, because at the end of the day, it's your money on a shelf.
Right.
And it's pennies on the dollar. If you get in a situation where you need cash and your cash isn't in the bank, it's not like you can just liquidate that inventory and turn it into cash without some sort of penalty.
And we're going to talk about how to tactics for avoiding the delivery fee using some of the tools that we built since last August. So stock only what you need. Another important thing that we covered last August was about knowing what you have. And you mentioned, Chris, inventory is basically the same as having cash in the bank. Or actually cash sitting on a shelf, really. Yep. It's the same thing as a stack of cash sitting on your shelf. So, knowing what you ordered is pretty important. And even for the smaller shops, it's it's very beneficial to use purchase orders for purchasing, because it ties back whatever the vendor brings to you to an actual sale to a customer.
Yep.
Right? Talk more about that. What do you see out there?
Well, yeah, and I just took a call this morning. I was actually on a call with a group that's in the Midwest, and we were talking about, why would I want my techs to put in the price of this part or to receive this and go through this effort? And what's the importance of it? And when I was talking through it, I said, well, if you or I went to the store and bought a part for our own car and spent household money, cash out of our pocket for our personal use, we would be absolutely invested in how much does it cost? Did I get the best price? Where is it stocked? Don't lose it. You'd be all over that part, especially if it were an expensive part. And what I find is somehow we lose that transition. We go to work for somebody, we're working in a shop, somebody else is the owner. We don't see it as the same cash as if it's our cash coming out of our own pocket. And I think that, putting the disciplines in place to track those, use legitimate PO numbers that are randomized, so people can't just walk up. We used to use unit numbers for POs. We had just about everybody in the city saying, "Hey, put it on the Shamrock account, PO 1234."
Right.
And so, having disciplined, randomized POs, there's value in that. Having people actually receive it, structured receiving, where you're signing off that you took in this product, you're responsible for it, and then actually putting them in locations where you can go back and count them. Right? I think that those are just basic fundamentals at any major warehouse. And even if you're not in a warehouse, it's your shop, right? I can tell you right now, I have some parts for an oil service. I know exactly where those parts are, and I know exactly where that $30 filter is, because it's mine and it came right out of my checking account. It should be the same way at the shop, and there should be leadership at the shop or an understanding at the shop to know that this is all real cash.
Yeah, you got to defend the margin, defend the parts margin.
I think you bring up a good example too on margin, Jacob. Last time you brought up, if I lost $100 worth of parts, how much would the shop actually have to sell to make up $100 worth of lost parts?
Yeah.
And I think you have like a ratio. You'd have to, or even 1,000.
Well, yeah. I mean, so 10% profit margin, right, is my go-to. So you have to do $1,000 worth of work just to make up for $100 worth of parts that you forgot to build or that you lost. And if you're a shop that's just breaking even, if you're like 1% margin, you got to do $10,000 worth of work to make up for a $100 part that you lost. So it's a big deal. And obviously, we don't recommend running at a 1% or even a 10% margin. You need to be higher than that. But good, yeah. So knowing what you ordered, it's important, right? So there's accountability there. What about who received it? So having accountability around, did the part actually show up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a stickler on making sure, when you're receiving a lot of parts, whether it's expensive parts or small parts, at the end of the day, you have to have a mechanism or a system that who signed for it.
Right.
I love the way that inside of Full Bay, as I'm logged in and I'm going to receive the part, it's automatically stamping. I'm the person that received it. It's tying myself to a PO. If it's tied to a service order, it's even linked to the service order. Everything's kind of fully contained, because a lot of moving parts of the shop. We have no idea who did what, when, where on the service order from 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
That was 2 weeks ago.
What about kind of knowing where stuff is? Talk about part locations are obvious, right? You want to know on your inventory what shelf or which warehouse or which service truck something's on. But what about the part categories? How can that help?
Well, I think that part category, most of the time, what I see the part categories, it's easy to filter and sort your inventory. Just if you go to your inventory list, you got 25,000 parts or 10,000 parts, and you just want to see filters. It's very simple to have a part category called filters, just to get the preview of all of your filters and kind of just, I guess, filter down the list. And then the other thing was, we got an error there. Sorry. The other thing was, sorry.
I just changed the name of my computer. It's a new computer. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Fair enough. But the other thing with knowing where your parts are is that just from a put away standpoint, right? So let's say that you have a different person that's receiving, and we actually, if you're using barcoding, you can barcode your inventory. If you're barcoding your inventory and you're labeling it, then you have somebody else, like a lower dollar an hour person, just actually physically putting it away. The barcode actually tells you exactly where it goes, so that when you go to look for that particular bin, you've got it labeled on your box, you can clearly place it in the slot. So there's some advantages to doing it just from the operational side, but more importantly, when it's time to, if it's a service truck and we're missing product, who are we going to hold accountable?
Right. Yeah. Well, all right. A couple more review things. Knowing how much you have, that really goes along with counting the inventory, right? Which nobody wants to do. Hardly anybody really counts their inventory.
Nobody.
The best shops obviously do. So when you're using our software, Fullway, you've got your inventory list, or maybe you're using QuickBooks, whatever. The quantity on your inventory list should really match the quantity that you actually have around, right? So
ideally,
for
right?
a multitude of reasons, it matters. And when you're doing the count, if at all possible, you want to avoid double entry. So count inventory on a tablet and just directly enter it there. And then it's when you count it. So I know a lot of people just got done doing their year-end inventory. Maybe for tax purposes, your accountant wants you to do that to calculate the cost of goods sold, and that's fine. And counting at year-end is a good idea. But throughout the year, it's really important to stay up on counting and to do what are called cycle counts. And I know, Chris, you've got a ton of experience with this. Talk us through the different cycles. So obviously you don't want to have to boil the ocean. Like when it's intimidating to look at your inventory and think, wow, we got to go count every single one of those things, lock the doors, no one's leaving until this is done, order food. Does it have to be like that?
Well, and like leading up to the counted part, I think one of the things that's most important is if you're overstocking, you're stocking a bunch of dead inventory, then that's going to be cumbersome when you go to count, right? There's just aisles everywhere, there's bays, there's bins. It can be overwhelming. But if you've got your inventory down,
some people may not even know what a part is. Like, what is this thing?
Right.
I don't even know what it's called on the list. It's not labeled anymore.
Every shop's got that part. Yeah, that's for sure. No, but you're absolutely right. But there's some basic fundamentals to counting. There's really 4 categories when you go to do cycle counts. The first category is one that most people underestimate, and it's they're usually fast movers, but any part that ends up being negative, what should happen is if you've got negative counts in your inventory, and with Fullbay it's super easy, you can just go to the inventory list, sort by the negatives, sort by the quantity in stock, and sort to the negatives. Negatives should be reconciled daily.
Yeah,
that's just a standard go-to. If you've got negative inventory, your parts person or somebody in the shop who's assigned to parts should be counting those daily and reconciling those. More than likely, there could have been a receive error, or possibly you have a product on the shelf that someone might have put there.
Right.
Someone might have just taken it negative, and you're selling stuff that's not even there. Hey, where are all these parts? Technicians are saying, where are these parts?
Yeah.
I would also, from the negatives, if you have a problem with negatives, restrict who can actually do it. So if you've got access turned on where techs can sell negative and negatives are out of control to the point that there's a lot of confusion, don't let them sell negative. They can still put the part on the order, but let the parts person decide.
Gotcha.
But negatives daily. The other thing would be the industry standard is an ABC approach. And so if you haven't heard of A's are typically what they call fast moving parts. And anything that's moving fast, brake shoes, brake drums, wheel seals, glad hands, whatever it is that's moving quickly in the shop monthly, you're going to count those every single month. Someone should be out there counting fast movers. It doesn't have to be every single day. If you broke it out that, this aisle's this week, this aisle's the next week, you can kind of really break it down back to your boiling the ocean. You don't try to count it all, all in one day. Just break it out across the month. So at the end of the month, the cycle's done and the A's are done. And then as you get into mid movers, the quarterly items, it's going to slow down a little bit more. Maybe you have slower moving parts, maybe they're starters, or maybe there's some alternators that are a little bit slower. Just depends on how your shop runs. You could have some other different types of parts, but at any rate, quarterly you would count the mid movers, and then at least twice a year you would count your slow moving inventory. So at the end of the year, you can honestly say that you've kept up on it and everything's counted. At your year end, you've knocked out the C's, you've been up on top of the B's, and your A's are done monthly anyway. Worst case scenario, it's, you're going to power through it the last 2 weeks of the year, and then you're going to try to reconcile losses and gains.
Right. And that's when you realize that, you lost a couple grand in inventory, and you don't know that it happened back in April, but you would have known back in April that it was that one guy that you fired and he grabbed it on the way out, and you could have, who knows, right?
Or a part that's mispriced. Maybe you've had something going on for so long you've just never looked at it. Like you you did a bulk buy, you did some forward buy and bought a pallet of something, and you got a great deal on it, and there was no return on that investment because you
Right.
left the pricing at the wrong pricing.
Right. Yeah. So we definitely recommend counting it regularly. Stay on top of it with these tactics. All right. The second of 3 polling questions. Next one. When you're buying parts, do you have to hit a minimum order quantity to qualify for free shipping or price discounts? So I'm gonna launch this question, so you can enter your response directly in the question I'm about to launch. But do you ever deal with this where you're looking for price discounts? Just launch the question. Here we go. Obviously, we see this a lot in rural areas, but even in cities.
Yeah. And a lot of people have gone to just parts running themselves. It just depends on if it's cost effective for you. If cycle time's more important, you can hire the driver cheaper than waiting.
Sure.
You can get faster return on cores, immediate credits.
Definitely. All right, I'm going to close this poll here, and let's share the results. All right, so when you're buying parts, it looks like majority is no, but there's some yeses, actually, close to half. We've got some NAs in there. We're excited to talk about some stuff that can help with that and some other things. So after the webinar in August, I mentioned, actually at the end of that webinar, we announced some features that were going live soon, and they're now live. They're baking. We've learned some about those. We made some tweaks to them. But we want to round out the webinar by talking about these new features. And they're specific to full bay, but if you're not using full bay, these are still good concepts. So centralized ordering, we're going to hit thresholds, price catalogs, and enhanced reporting. And let's jump in here. So centralized ordering, why does that matter? And what is centralized ordering, Chris?
Well, for some people, it can be two different things. One is you've got multiple shops and you're trying to pool your orders to one shop and do like a cross dock.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've got a bunch of people on the service drive who are ordering parts for trucks that are in the bays, and then you get somebody in inventory who's trying to buy inventory, and you're trying to maybe pool or centralize that to one order. So I've seen people reference it in two different fashions.
Okay, gotcha. And then combining orders. So this whole concept of maybe I need to order some parts from a vendor for a service order for a job, but at the same time I kind of need to restock some of my inventory from that same vendor, and I'd like to combine that. And obviously that means one trip from the parts runner or whatever, and that seems to be an important thing. Lots of people were asking for that ability. Because in full bay for a while, you couldn't combine those orders.
The only way you could was you would just order it to a job, and then you would move the balance to inventory.
Right.
That was kind of the way that it worked. But at the same time, you didn't have visibility. Maybe we have some shops that have 4 parts people that are sourcing parts, and when you have 4 different parts people, we're all calling the same vendor at the same time.
Right.
So and even if we did call the same vendor independently, which is just kind of the nature of the situation. When we go to make a consolidated buy, we never really had an opportunity to make a consolidated buy. We were placing 4 independent orders.
Right.
And I think with this new feature, this allows you to see or have a preview of not only other orders that are in the shop tied to a vendor, but it also opens up subsequent shops. So maybe you're in a region or a market where you have 3, 4, 6 shops, just depends on the scenario, and you're trying to pull some orders because this is LTL. Maybe this isn't coming from a local supplier. It's going to come shipped. You've got to hit some thresholds or some order quantities. But the idea is that you could pool those orders, you get visibility, the opportunity to add and consolidate the order and place the order as part of an inventory order, even a counter sale, or even a service order.
So it's pretty cool. So literally when I'm creating an inventory order, I can see at the top of the screen, say I am ordering from Fleet Pride. Right, I can see immediately at the top of the screen the total I'm currently ordering from Fleet Pride, and then it will also indicate if there's any service orders we're working on that have parts that need to come from Fleet Pride.
Absolutely.
And I can grab those and put them on the same order. Yes. And kind of save some time there and save some duplicate ordering.
It'll do that, and it'll do that not only for just one vendor, multiple vendors. So maybe you're placing an order for brake shoes from one place, and you're placing an order from a turbo from another place. it's going to source and pull up all of the parts that are available for both vendors simultaneously. So with that new feature in full bay, definitely, I'm not sure how many people are out there using it, or there's a lot of material that we have, but it's definitely powerful. Been getting a lot of feedback from a few different groups that are out there.
Yeah, it's new. All right. Along the same lines, I know what we added on that same screen when you're ordering inventory is the ability to track thresholds. So let's say Fleet Pride charges for a delivery, right? And I want to make sure that I get enough on this order that they're not going to charge me. I like hit the break point where they're going to do a free delivery, right? Talk about that.
Yeah, same thing. And a lot of times it's also the shipping, right? New Live, Meritor. Maybe you're going to PACCAR.
Actual freight. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you're actually pulling in a big order, or you've got pricing. Maybe there's, we've seen it in a couple places. Maybe you need to hit a minimum of $2,500 before you can get that special pricing break of 30% off. Anything below that is only 20% off. So you're obviously trying to maximize your time and effort. And if you have the ability to throw on a couple more parts that you already need that are already in play, we hit the minimum order quantity, we consolidate the freight, we save on that, or we hit the minimum order quantity to get free shipping. So we've seen it in a couple of different areas, but typically the main area is when it's shipped in and it's from those large providers.
And in the past, if let's say I'm trying to hit the threshold, I might order just a little bit more inventory to get me over the hump. But this gives you visibility into all the active jobs going in your operation, so you can include those and get the credit, and thereby keep less inventory than you otherwise would have there, and you're going to save on the carrying costs and having inventory you don't need and so forth.
Yeah, and the same thing where we could place 3 different orders at 3 different shops, or we could have somebody on the service drive placing orders, and I'm over in inventory placing orders. Without that visibility, we were seeing where there's additional freight charges, right? We sent 2 independent orders. We didn't hit the minimum order, so we only got 20% discount, plus we got shipping charges. Maybe we didn't care about the shipping charges because we passed those on to the customer. Just depends on the shop.
Yeah.
But we surely didn't make enough at the margin that we could have made had we got the pricing.
So let's dig into that. So if I've got 2 locations, you're saying I can see what each location is ordering from a particular vendor.
Yeah, you can see what each location's ordering, and you can also see what they're ordering at the service order level as well.
So you can combine that, and it's cross stock.
Basically, yeah, yes. And in most cases, I guess that's the scenario. For those of you out there, some of you are already using a cross stock scenario where you're shipping, you're trying to pull the orders from 3 different branches together. So that's one way, and you're pulling it into one place. You're hitting a threshold. You might even have a threshold with the vendor where they don't care where they drop ship it, as long as the order's 3,000. They'll drop ship it to all 3 of your locations, and they'll give you that pricing, but you have to buy at least 3,000.
Yeah.
So it works both ways, whether it's to hit a minimum on that freight side, and you're going to do some cross stocking or classic supply chain of moving the inventory, or it's just for pricing, right? I think most of the time it's that pricing scenario. Yeah. Even with New Life, right? You hit a certain number and they'll give you free shipping.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha. All right. By the way, there is, so obviously the feature now in full bay is you can set these thresholds on the vendors, where you have to hit a certain dollar amount to get a free order or to get a price break. So that you can actually go into the vendor setup and indicate, it is 2,500 or it's 500 or 250 or whatever it is. But there's going to be some scenarios where you want to break the rules, right? And or the flip side is maybe you want to restrict certain people from being able to break the rules, and other people you trust to use good judgment, right? So there's a permission that allows you to override that threshold and violate it.
Yes.
So that's in there as well. So if it's something you want to start using, know that you can grant the ability to violate those thresholds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on the flip side, you can restrict the ability to violate it. So the order cannot be placed unless it's hitting the threshold. All right. Last polling question. Do you ever get electronic price lists from your vendors? I'm gonna launch this thing here. Do you ever get electronic price lists? Launch this thing. This would be like a CSV file or maybe even a PDF, but ideally like a CSV or spreadsheet, something that you can use on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. A lot of times people, they'll have like map pricing that you'll get for the year, for the 6 months, and you're committed to this pricing on the things that you buy.
Yeah.
If you choose to buy them from them.
All right, I'm going to close this poll. Here's the results. 50-50. Wow. That's pretty good. 50-50. All right, well.
So why would you need one of those?
Yeah, who cares? Electronic price list. Just call them, right? So let's talk about this. One of the other features that we added was the ability to build an internal parts catalog. And this is just for internal use within your shop operation. And this is evolving. I mean, there's a lot of ideas floating around this, and we're going to continue to build this out. But one of the things that we thought hard about when we originally were building Full Bay was, do you include every part you've ever ordered in your inventory, like all special order parts? And it felt like the answer was no, because you're going to end up totally overloading your inventory list. And I know that's how QuickBooks works, right? I mean, with QuickBooks, anytime you order another part, if you actually want to track it, even though it's a special order part, you actually have to add it to your item list.
Right.
Your inventory item list. And we established the belief fundamentally that there's a difference between inventory parts that require counting and parts in your universe that you may potentially special order again. And we wanted to make that distinction so the inventory list can be this lean, mean thing that, is relevant. It is not loaded, with 45,000 parts that you're never going to stock.
Right.
And that's something that we, when we have new customers coming out with Full Bay, we have that discussion a lot and help make that distinction. And usually people like it.
Yeah, it's normally the technical debt from QuickBooks. That's typically what it is. QuickBooks has forced them to use this, or their prior system has forced them to use this mechanism to where they've got 30,000 parts in inventory. And when you ask them, they're like, well, it's really not 30,000. It's probably only 5,000.
Yeah.
Well, what is all this? Oh, well, that's really order history, but the system forced me to do this.
And a lot of times they like it because I need to special order this. What did I pay last time? Go look it up. It's in the inventory, right?
Right. And even that's even cumbersome, right? Because then those systems allow you to add the parts numerous times. So then you don't even know what's the right part anymore.
Sure.
You've got like 7 drums. You don't even know which drum's the right drum. And it's all just a bunch of order history or this ability to just freely add parts.
Right.
But I think that Full Bay has always had that right to keep that separate, because inventory is inventory. That's real stuff that you're counting and you're tracking. That is the cash on the shelf. If it's not physically in the building, then it's not inventory, right? And that's kind of the essence of what inventory is.
No, I totally agree. But I agree with the concept that there's value in that whole order history.
Absolutely.
There can be value if it's done right. So we believe that too. I mean, you've always had the ability to view the history of special order parts that you've ordered in Full Bay.
Yes.
It's been there, and so that when you're adding a part to a service order, as you type the part number or the description or whatever, you get this drop-down list that shows, it shows parts matching what you've typed from inventory, but it also shows parts matching what you've typed so far from your special order parts history, which is very valuable because then you can choose it and it'll pre-populate, Freightliner as the vendor, and you can even click a little button that says price history, and it'll show you how much you paid and when, and it's really handy because, depending on the vendor, sometimes you call them up and they might be in a bad mood and you get a worse price, right? Well,
or they forget who you are.
Right, exactly. So that's always been there, and the desire for us was, if you get a parts catalog electronically from a vendor, we want you to be able to load that in so that is available in that dropdown as well, so that even the first time you order it, it's on the dropdown. And because people want to keep this history, and even new customers coming in, right? They don't want to lose all that history. You want to keep this history in the special order parts so that they're easily accessible. So where do you draw the line here, right? We don't want this to become a dumping ground, so we added this. We call it the parts history, parts catalog. You don't want this to become a dumping ground.
No, not at all.
It should be real data, real prices, that you can leverage to better your shop. So, and you mentioned the filter example.
Yeah, I think that where this thing kind of comes together is that you've been given map pricing for a specific vendor, or you have a catalog that you run off of. And a good example is the filters, right? Maybe you're buying filters from Fleet Guard or Baldwin or somebody, and they have hundreds or thousands of filters. It depends on who you're buying your filters from. And the last thing you're going to do is make this a dumping ground where you try to take the entire Baldwin or Fleet Guard filter list and just send it into this cataloging area, this price history area. Because then it'd just be more technical debt for you, right? That's why they have their website and their cross-referencing, et cetera. But let's say that we sold 40 of them, and of the 40 that we sold, we really only stocked 15. And I needed that for quoting, for quote history. Maybe I'm just starting with full bay. I just want to get that map pricing and make sure that I'm very clear on what's my current map pricing for 2019 for my 40 filters. And oh, by the way, I keep getting hit with these random 10 filters tied to international. Well, you can upload this list of filters into this price history file and use that for quote history. You've never ordered the part, maybe you have or you haven't ordered the part, and it basically gives you this it's instead of having another spreadsheet pinned to the wall or another spreadsheet in the desk drawer, you've actually got it right inside of Full Bay that says, oh, here's this filter, here's how much it costs, here's where you buy it from.
And I believe didn't a feature just go live that also leverages the cross-reference information on parts? I might be thinking of something else.
That's a different feature.
That's different. All right.
But what this feature does, though, is let's say that, and there's switches now at the shop levels. So anybody who's out there that's using Full Bay today that already has an existing shop, you can go to your shop settings and into configuration. You can turn these lists on and off from showing up on a service order. So say I'm keying in a service order, or I'm on the parts list and I don't want to see price files, or I do want to see price files in that drop down.
Right.
You can enable that or disable it. You can enable and disable part history. But what's nice also is that let's say that you decide that one of those filters you're going to start stocking. You start looking at your reporting and you decide, I really need to start stocking that. You can actually order right from that parts catalog list. You can actually place an order leveraging that part as a special order, one-time order, or you can say, I want to place an order to inventory and actually buy off of that parts list straight into inventory. Now, at that point, it would convert it from a parts history list or a catalog type item straight into a direct inventory part. It would actually migrate it for you as part of that process. It would ask you the question, are you sure you want to do this? I say, yeah, and now I'm officially stocking that new filter.
Yep.
Super slick tool. You can load like 15,000 at a time into this thing. So if you did have a need to load, 60,000 parts or a catalog of 60,000 parts,
do it 4 times.
You'd do it 4 times. Ideally, though, you guys really should use good judgment on this. I don't know how many you could effectively use in there. It is a very clever tool, way better than a spreadsheet. But there is a point of no return. I would load the lists that make the most sense for your shop.
Sure.
It's a great tool.
Sure, definitely. So this gives you the ability to manage all that information, because you might be getting, you may not even be aware that these are available. You just go ask a vendor, hey, do you guys have this available? Yeah, we do actually. Here you go.
If you're quoting, if you find yourself at like a body shop, or you're doing trailer repairs or something where you're quoting a lot of body work or a lot of trailer repair stuff, and you don't have the pricing, or you need to use price lists, and you find that your sales rep has, a folder or a briefcase full of things, that's the type of stuff to throw in there, so you can do quick, efficient quoting, get those turned around and into service orders into the shop.
Love it. Yeah, it's a great feature. All right, final one. So last thing, we built a lot of reports around inventory since our last webinar in August, and so let's talk about enhanced reporting. One of my favorite is this inventory velocity, inventory turn report. Why does this matter, and how can people use this?
Yeah, this kind of where we started this thing. If you're stocking inventory, you should really know is it moving or not moving, right? Because this is cash. If we go all the way back to the beginning of this is cash out of your banking account sitting on your shelf. And if you find yourself strapped for cash, go walk out to the parts room. You probably got a really big parts room. That's probably one thing. There's your cash. Yeah. Almost, it's not for everybody, but I'm going to say probably like 7 out of 10 times if someone says they're got receivables issues or cash flow issues, it's sitting on a shelf. But you go to the velocity report and you say, how much of the stuff do I have and isn't even moving? If you haven't sold it in a year, it shouldn't be on your shelf. If you've only sold it 1 or 2 times in the year, there better be a pretty good reason why, like someone prepaid for it. Because if you're just stocking a part, you couldn't have got a good enough disc. I mean, like there's probably some rare use cases, but generally speaking, you're not getting the best discount that would warrant stocking something for a year. And
not at a 20% annual hit on average. So
and the risk of losing it, right?
Yeah.
Or the core, like where's the core charge on that thing?
And
it's a double hit.
Maybe the guy that ordered it's gone now and nobody even knows what this is anymore. Where did we get it from? So it's a good opportunity to identify dead inventory.
Absolutely. That would be like my first go-to. Am I actually selling this thing? Does it belong in this building? Absolutely. That's the #1 use case for this thing.
So same concept on the next one, the special order velocity. Talk about that.
Yeah, and just one other thing on inventory velocity. The only other thing I would say, or one other good benefit for inventory velocity, if something's moving fast and I'm ordering it too much and I'm constantly out of stock, this is where we're going to give you demand. We're going to give you demands and turns. So if you've got more demand than you're supplying, or that you're holding in stock, or your organization has more demand because you can see multiple, where you're transferring the inventory out.
Right.
That's another thing. There is an expense to running around chasing parts. JIT is great, and to the point of which it's causing a burden and causing expense to your shop. So if you're just running around chasing parts, that's not at all what we're saying. We're not anti-inventory, but that velocity report will help you make better decisions on, should I stock a little bit more to create that whirlwind, or to get rid of some of that whirlwind that's in the shop.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Special order.
By the way, you're mentioning how much to stock. In our webinar in August, we talked about the economic order quantity, and it's a math formula, but it basically spits out what you ought to order for any given part. That inventory velocity report has your inputs for calculating economic order quantity.
Absolutely, so great point.
Go back to that webinar, and you can see that.
Yeah, on our channel. That one of the reasons why some of you might be saying, well, why are you guys covering this stuff? Well, we got a lot of feedback from that last webinar. It's worth going back, looking at economic order quantity. People wanted that formula, they wanted access to it. So special order velocity, it's very similar to inventory. One of the things that, we were talking about this expensive chasing down parts and stuff like that. And there's also the convenience and execution, right? So if you're buying a lot of parts special order, it may make sense, but there is a point where it should turn into inventory. So if I'm selling 10 turbos a month and it's the same exact turbo on every single sale, I probably should stock a few of those.
Yeah.
Now it could be, if I have sales trends that prove that I'm selling it, I've got a couple of reports there. I'm going to use the velocity report, and I'm also going to couple that with the sold parts report, and I'm going to start looking at some trending so I can make good decisions. But far too often, I'll meet with somebody, and it's usually weekly. There'll be somebody with some questions on inventory, and it's very quick that we get into a conversation where there's emotional buying going on. And I'm asking, are you using any of these reports? Are you using this report? Have you used any of the new reports? And they're really from the inventory reconciliation report all the way through these reports. They're not getting used by inventory managers, and they're buying. So one of the things that you can use as a gauge on some of you business owners that are on this webinar, you can go back and say, well, how's my shop performing? Go back to your inventory velocity report and just run that for a period and say, what was my inventory balance when I started, let's just say October, and what did I end October at? And look at it for each period, one by one, and just see what your inventory team is doing or your parts manager is doing. Is he slowly siphoning the cash out of the bank and putting it on the shelf? And then why is he doing that? The inventory velocity and the special order velocity will help you go back and manage, and you can give that person some tools. Because the answer isn't firing the parts guy. I mean, maybe that's for some people, but that's not always the answer. It's making sure that they understand the tools. Maybe they were never trained to do this. But I would get the inventory reconciliation. I would couple it with these velocity reports and sold part report, and you have enough tools here to start making some good educated decisions. And if you're not using them, you could be emotional buying.
Yeah, and you mentioned the cash getting siphoned off. Most shops are using accrual accounting, which means that when you buy something for inventory and put it on the shelf, it doesn't actually show up on your profit and loss statement as an expense. It doesn't show up until you sell it. And so, but it does drain the cash.
Yes.
And there's in QuickBooks, there's a report called the Statement of Cash Flows that exposes this, where you can see the change in inventory. When inventory goes up, it's considered a use of cash. It's a drain on cash. So that's one way you can view it. But the way it's real. So you may think that you're running your shop super profitable, and you may be in growth mode, booking profits, growing. But along with that, your inventory is growing, and that may suck up your cash. And when you grow, you need working capital.
Yes.
That's real, but you need to be careful that inventory doesn't get bigger than it actually needs to be, because it's going to suck up your resources.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Great
well,
point.
I think that's our last one. And this webinar, it's going to be available on our website, fullbay.com, within 48 hours, which is a change. In the past, we've been posting these on YouTube. We're going to make them available on our website going forward to make it easier to access. And then let's hit some questions. Let's see here. Oh, I don't have any questions. 0 questions. I may not have encouraged that as much. If you have any questions, you can throw those on there, and we will. If we don't get to them here, we'll reach out to you and answer your questions. And then we wanted to say, oh, I let it go, but let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to cover. As we continue to plan our year 2019 in these webinars, what you like, what you don't like. Shoot us a message, support@fullbay.com, or you can put it here in the webinar. Thanks for your time, and Chris, thanks a lot. And we'll see you guys next month.
Absolutely. Look forward to seeing everyone.
Right. Take care.